Thank you so much, Marina, and a big thank you to CharityVillage for having us here today. We're really excited to talk to you about the Google Ad Grants program. We love the Google Ad Grants program. So we're excited to talk about how to boost your nonprofit's impact with $10,000 per month in free Google Ads. We want to introduce ourselves to you. So right now, person's talking. My name is Simon. I'm the founder of ConnectAd. Now, ConnectAd is a digital marketing agency that exclusively works with nonprofits. We specialize in the Google Ad Grants program. We've been doing this since 2010. This is our bread and butter. We've worked with over 300 plus nonprofits over the years with 100% success rate in terms of applying for the grant. Currently, this generates over 10 million in free marketing every year. We're also all over here, we're Google certified experts, and very proud to say that we are one of 45 organizations worldwide that are Google Ad Grants certified professionals. So it's a special designation right from the Google Ad Grants team. Also on the call, we have David. David does a lot of the development here at ConnectAd, and a lot of what he does on a day-to-day basis is talk to nonprofits just like you to figure out if the grant is even right for them. So he's going to offer his perspective on that front, and we're happy to have him here today as well. So let's dive into the agenda. There are 6 main topics we want to talk about today. Number 1, the Google Grants criteria. We know you're all busy. We want to make sure that you're eligible for the grants so that you're happy sticking around to hear the rest of the presentation. Number 2, what is the Google Grants? Number 3, what is pay-per-click advertising? Number 4, the problems that Google Grants can solve for your nonprofit. Number 5, we'll talk about the application process. And lastly, we're going to dive into some tips in terms of how you can succeed with the Google Grant. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David, who is going to take us through the Google Grants criteria. David?
Awesome. Thank you, Simon. And yeah, thanks again to CharityVillage. Really excited to be here. And that's exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis. Already had a couple calls this morning with organizations across Canada, the US, and the world about how to succeed with the Google Ad Grant and to point them in the right direction. So starting with the right direction, like Simon said, we want to make sure that everyone in the room is eligible. So we'll go through the main criteria for the Google Ad Grant. 1, 2, 3, very simple. So first and foremost, you need to be a registered nonprofit or charity. So this, specifically speaking to our Canadian organizations in attendance, you are either a valid charity or nonprofit. So that's very important to know that you don't need to be a charity, but you do need to be a nonprofit. And if you're not a Canadian organization, for example, the US, it would be the 501c3 designation. Google has a list of 50 plus countries where the ad grant is eligible. So you have to be one of those countries, and a registered nonprofit. And then also you need to be registered with TechSoup Canada. This is a free process and it's a validation that tells Google for Nonprofits that you are who you say you are as a legitimate organization with a legitimate cause. So just to recap, valid charity or nonprofit in Canada, also the TechSoup token, which Simon will touch upon in the application portion of today's webinar. Criteria number 2, also probably very self-explanatory for many of you in the room, as you already have one, that your nonprofit needs a website. I'll quickly dive into the fact that it needs to be a website of a somewhat high quality. Google has a list of that website policy easily accessible on their support forum, and that includes, for example, the HTTPS security, as well as it's a easily loading site. There's not a lot of broken links, and the content is laid out in a clear manner. Also, of course, obviously, the nonprofit website needs to be tied to the nonprofit. So it can't be any personal site or deviating to even a social media channel. You need to have a website that is your own, tied to the registered organization. And finally, an inverse. So the first 2 you wanted to make sure you had, and this one is you want to make sure you're not one of the following. And this is going to be government entities and organizations, academic institutions, or hospital or medical groups. So note there, this is, for example, the institutions themselves. So if you're a hospital or, for example, a high school, you would not be eligible unless, as noted by the parentheses, you have a philanthropic arm. So for example, a hospital foundation or a library foundation, that would be eligible for the ad grant, but the institution itself would not be. Also a note on this, hospital or medical causes are very different, right? That is an advocacy group, not the institution itself. Same thing with education. You could be an education advocacy group for various ages and various types of learning, but you cannot be the institution itself unless you have that philanthropic arm. So now that we know who's eligible, again, to recap, you're a registered nonprofit or charity, you have a website tied to that nonprofit or charity, and you're not a government entity, hospital, or school institution. We're going to talk, simply put, what is the Google Grant? As in many of my conversations, I find that there's some misinformation about this, and we want to make sure you walk away from today's webinar with a full understanding, very clear on what the opportunity is, so you can bring it to your team and maybe to your board and explain it succinctly. So simply put, the Google Ad Grant is $10,000 per month in free Google Ads. That is the opportunity, and that is the best way to explain it. And I'll repeat it again, $10,000 per month. Again, as you see here, $10,000 per year, nope, and $10,000 one time, no. It is $10,000 per month every month. So we'll provide a little visualization here so you can understand what that really looks like. Number one, it's not actual currency they're providing you. This is AdWords credits, $10,000 per month. And 1 month, 2 month, 3, they're all 10,000. They reload every single month with no end date in sight, as long as you meet Google's program standards. Simon will explain that a little bit more in the steps for success portion, and of course we'll talk about that during the Q&A a bit. But the note here is that if you ever spend the maximum amount, your ads stop running. So this is a big myth, and we want to debunk it here. You're never charged by Google for anything. The $10,000 is actually averaged out per day. So $330 and change each day. And so if your ads, for example, spend the maximum amount on today, a Thursday, they would stop running until tomorrow when that budget is refreshed. So you don't have to wait for the following month, and you're never charged by Google for anything, so there's no bill. So really clear again, it's not currency, it's AdWords credits, $10,000 per month every single month, and you're never charged by Google for anything, no end date in sight, as long as you meet those minimum program standards. So we're going to run our first poll of the day before Simon goes into the aspects of pay-per-click advertising and how that relates to the ad grant budget. We just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. How much is Google Grants worth? $10,000 per month, $10,000 one time, and $10,000 per year. We ask because we want to make sure that everyone is literally on the same page, because if you fully understand the value of the opportunity, it will obviously be more incentivized for your team to follow that. So go ahead and give it a couple seconds, and then we will show the results.
That's awesome, David. And just for those of you that are haven't voted in a poll before, you can just vote right on your screen there. Good stuff. David, I'm going to close this poll. So it looks like we're sitting at 97%, 10,000 per month. So I think we did a good job there of making that point.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So 97% correct. And again, we say that because we know that if you approach your board or the executive director or the rest of your team, and it's only presented as $10,000 one time or $10,000 per year, you might not, decide to go forward with the ad grant. But we want to communicate really the tremendous value and not to leave this free money on the table. So that's $120,000 per year, and then as many years as you use it. So like I said, Simon's going to now discuss pay-per-click advertisement and how that connects to the 10K budget with the ad grant.
Perfect. So to really understand how the grant works, you need a background on what was traditionally called pay-per-click advertising. You don't really see it referred to that really as much anymore, but I want to explain to you what PPC advertising is. So I'm going to bring on the screen a little screenshot, and this is a sample search results page on Google. So let's say, for example, I'm going to Google, I'm searching donate used clothing. I'm going to see a list of results come up on the page. So let me just break down the page a little bit for you. Now, in the first section at the top, that's usually reserved for what we call paid ads, but what was traditionally called pay-per-click ads. And the reason why it's called pay-per-click is because usually whenever someone clicks on one of those ads, the advertiser has to pay a certain amount of money for that click. But of course, if you have the Google grant, that is just free for you, right? You're not actually paying that amount. It comes out of the $10,000 in credits that you have every month. I want to kind of just contrast that with the section below, which is for what we call organic listings. Organic listings are sort of like the natural search results. So basically, it's what Google is deciding is most relevant to what the person is searching for. And the big distinction with organic listings is that, you know, whenever someone clicks on one of those results, you don't have to pay anything. Now, if you want to talk about how to get yourself placed inside organic listings, well, we're getting into the field of digital marketing called search engine optimization, or SEO for short. So we're not gonna dive into SEO today. We're just gonna talk and focus on the paid ads portion. And I want to draw one very important advantage of the paid ads, and that is that it always appears above the organic listings. And so there's a lot of value in being the first thing that people see when they're searching for something. So let's talk a bit more about how paid ads actually work. So put yourself in the shoes of an advertiser or a nonprofit who's using the grant for now. And let's say you want to use this grant to promote your used clothing donations program. And the first thing you need to do is to come up with a list of what we call keywords, which are just like search queries of what you think people are going to use to search for you online. So for example, some keywords might be donate used clothing, or donate used goods, or donation boxes, right? All relevant keywords to what I'm trying to do. And so what happens is, if someone's search matches a keyword that is on my list, my ad has a chance to appear at the top of the search results. And so if someone clicks on that ad, they get taken to a page on my website that I have designated. So in this example, because it's about donating used clothing, I'm gonna pick a landing page that talks all about our donations program and has ways for people to actually donate if they're interested. So that's just generally how pay-per-click advertising works in a more, like, kind of more simplified example. So I get asked this all the time when I first introduce, you know, what pay-per-click ads are. And it's something that I actually thought about when I first learned about it. But do people actually click on these ads? And so the data overwhelmingly supports that yes, people do. So what we see here is 300 million plus clicks per day on these ads. And so why the grant is so valuable is because what you want to do is to bring some of these clicks, which could be supporters, right? These could be your donors, and these could be your customers, right? And so you want to bring some of those people to your nonprofit's website where you can turn them into your supporters or your donors or your customers. So with that, you know, that's just like a very high level, almost theoretical look at how it all works. Let's get more granular and let's talk about some real case studies in terms of what it can do for nonprofits. So David, I'll let you take this away.
Absolutely. And again, that's what we want to communicate, the clear value and impact. And you really, with the pay-per-click advertising, you see how you're able to position your nonprofit in front of keywords related to content that people are searching for. So literally in the moment that people are searching, you would appear. That's really the value of the ad grant. And we want to show you a little bit how that works. So again, problems Google Grants can solve for you, also known as goals that you can achieve with the Google Ad Grants. There's so many use cases. And so what we'll show on the screen in just a moment is not the only ways you can use the ad grant, but it's definitely the most common ones, okay? So we'll go through one by one and explain a little bit how that works. But again, it's not limited to these ones on the screen. So number one, and the by far and away the most common response, is we need to increase awareness, right? Which is the name of the game with nonprofits. We need people to know that we exist. So this will be promoting to people looking for your brand, cause, or content. For example, they're searching for a piece of information or resource. They don't know you yet by name, so you can use the ad grant to appear in those search results. So now that the content they're looking for is tied to the services you offer. So awareness increasing and getting people engaged in your website and knowing that you're a trusted organization that provides that service. Number two, knowing that events are a pillar of nonprofit organizations, the ad grant is a really great way to increase event attendance. So for example, promoting to people looking for things to do in their area, or looking, to travel to a different area and, visit and things for them to do. So this could be a family activity, a date night, an individual outing. And so the event attendance is a great way to use the ad grant to either sell tickets or have people sign up for example, free events. So either paid or unpaid, you can really increase attendance, as we'll see in one of the case studies in just a bit. Another common use, and a really big one I want to focus on right now, is selling more of our product services. Another myth we'll debunk today, and actually one that Google put out on an article themselves from Google for Nonprofits of the top myths with the Google ad grant. And that myth is that you can't use the ad grant budget to sell products and services. You absolutely can use the ad grant to sell products and services that benefit the organization. Of course, the product services have to be tied to your nonprofit operations and hosted on your website, but you can definitely use it to drive online sales and e-commerce. So I really want to emphasize that it is a myth to say that you can't use it to sell products and services, whether that's actual tangible merchandise or a subscription or membership, etc. Donations, so another common one, and I'll discuss this a couple different ways. Number one, like Simon showed with the pay-per-click example, in-kind donations, clothing donations, furniture, etc., used school supplies, right? So this is a great way and a very common service among nonprofit organizations, promoting to people looking to donate those items. Also, we understand the fundraising component and reality of organizations. And so with donations, you can also use the ad grant to run a campaign to drive people directly to a fundraising page or a contribution page. With that said, we're also aware that many people don't donate directly from a donation page and take a little bit of time and engagement. And so we are now going to feature the email list component, which is a great way to drive new subscriptions to then on your end, engage them in a way to possibly donate. So for example, you can use the ad grant to drive donations, but we also found that by growing your email list, as well as increasing volunteers, which is not listed on this page, and other ways to engage people, you have more people then to reach out to for a year-end appeal or Giving Tuesday. So to show what this looks like, we're going to go through a case studies, but first we want to run the second poll just to see if you had to start the ad grant today, what would be the first use case for the Google grant? Awareness, selling, emails, donations, or events. So we'll give this a couple seconds and then we'll show the results again.
Wonderful. So again, if you just want to go ahead and vote on your screen, I want to make sure at least half of everybody's had a chance to vote before we close the poll. Excellent. So David, I'm going to close this and share this one with everybody so that they can get a sense of where their colleagues are at. Do you see the poll results, David?
Yeah, thank you so much. So wow, 61%, that is actually really high. It's always the number one is awareness, about 40-45%. Donations, yeah, always number two, and events number three. So it's very consistent, but really incredible to see the results above and beyond what we've seen before. Majority of the room awareness, as the starting point. And then from there, with more awareness, of course, you would incentivize people to become engaged. So thanks for filling that out. Like Marina said, good to know who's in the room. So first case study we'll go through is the Redwood Women's Shelter, and this is in Toronto. And so the problem that they were facing and the exact campaign that they were looking to run is that the abused women that they were looking to serve were not aware about the actual shelter and the help they provided. So they wanted to get the word out and have people call, whether it was the women themselves or maybe loved ones and family members on behalf of the women, to direct them to the shelter. So we'll look first and foremost at step one, which is pick or build a landing page, okay? So we say pick a landing page, meaning you already have the existing content on your website, and you're just going to use that one for the sake of the ad grant campaign. Or build a landing page, meaning you need to build it from scratch because you don't have any existing content with the call to action that you're looking to promote. So here, they had a landing page existing, and we're going to circle in red the exact content that they were looking to drive people to, which is the 24-hour crisis line. So here you can see, both in the top right and then down below, 24-hour helpline with the number. So that is the objective, people to call that number. So now that we know where we're sending them to, which is kind of looking to work backwards, now you're going to see how you can send them there with the keyword research. So what you're looking at for context is finding relevant keywords with many searches using the Keyword Planner tool, which is a free tool in your Google AdWords account, where you can find keyword suggestions and keyword research to know which ones to use for the ads. So the takeaway here, and there's many details in this, and Simon will discuss a little bit more about targeting and negative keywords later on in the webinar, but for the sake of the case studies, we're focusing on two factors: high volume and low competition. High volume, of course, you want a lot of traffic for the ad grant and keywords that you're using, and low competition, meaning that there's not other organizations or businesses competing for those keywords, so you have a better chance of showing in the search results rankings higher up so people can find you. So again, high volume, low competition, and we'll have two more case studies so you can really be clear that those are, the name of the game, literally the keywords in keyword research. So step three, now that you have those keywords research completed, you see the ad, which is driving those searches to the landing page using the free Google ad budget. Like Simon had explained, every click is not charged to you, it's deducted from that budget. The ad here, get 24-hour support and shelter here, call now. So when they click on that link in the ad, it would drive them back to the landing page that we chose to begin with to have people actually call directly to that number for the Redwood Women's Shelter. And so wrapping up in the case study number one, the solution was using the free advertising to promote the keywords that we used: high volume, low competition, women's shelter or shelter for women, and the result, 630% increase in crisis calls per month. And so this is real nonprofits, real case studies, and that data is averaged out over the course of a year. So it's not just a one-time spike, but as you can see, a consistent, high impact ROI. So switching gears to the second case study, this is going to be for those who answered about events. This is the San Francisco Playhouse in California, and the problem was needing to sell more of their show tickets. So this is the call to action that they were choosing, is actually completing a purchase. So it's a little bit of a mix of the event attendance and purchasing a product or service. So again, step one, and it'll be very familiar to all of you by the third case study. Step one, pick or build a landing page. So here we're going to circle the exact call to action or meaningful conversion that they were looking to promote and have users complete, which is buy tickets, and the actual event calendar for someone to choose a show in the future to purchase a ticket for. Step two, back to the keyword planner, find those relevant keywords: high volume, low competition. So you want a lot of traffic, so there's a greater chance of clicks, which then increases a greater chance of conversions, and that low competition, so you're not competing for those valuable keywords. And then step three, once you create the ad, and Simon will discuss that space in the steps for success portion, you're going to drive those searches back to that landing page. The ad here, show calendar 2015-2016 season. Click on that ad, brings them to that landing page selected for them to complete the call to action using the free Google Ads. And so here the results really tremendous, especially for those of you interested in selling products, services, and especially tickets. The result was $4,600 in ticket sales per month directly from the free Google Ads. And so we put directly from the free Google Ads as a kind of a quantifier, because we want to make sure that you're using also conversion tracking and Google Analytics, And Simon will also explain that, because you don't want to just say, oh, okay, our ticket sales increased. That probably has something to do with the Google the Google ads we're running. You want to be able to track directly where those sales are coming from. So here, almost 5K per month directly from the free Google ads in those ticket sales. And the third and final case study for today's webinar will stay in the state of California with Save the Redwoods. So their exact call to action for this case study is building their email list to increase their support base for the conservation and preservation of the redwood forest. So that email list could be used for example, come out and support National Redwood Forest Day, or there's some action being taken about against the forest, call your local elected official, or a year-end appeal. So as you can see, that email list is super valuable for those rapid response actions and even fundraising engagement requests. So pick or build a landing page. Here it is offering a free guide in exchange for the email. So very low friction, low barrier to entry call to action, first and last name in the email, and in exchange, they get the guide. As you can see, a little thumbnail, very visually friendly, that gives them an opportunity to find what they're looking for, which in this case is information about giant sequoias, whether that's a resource for a teacher or a family activity, etc. Step 2, again, how do we drive people to that landing page? Well, using the keyword planner tool. You can see here very low competition, as you'll see in the search results in a second. High volume, low competition, that is the takeaway. And then getting to those search results, once you've selected those high volume, low competition keywords, you have the ad. So when someone types in sequoia trees, those keywords you've chosen to trigger that ad, the ad says download our free guide. The user would click on that ad covered by your 10K per month budget, lead them back to your landing page, and to increase your email list. And their result here, 400 emails per month directly from the free Google ads. So almost 5,000 new emails a year directly from ad grants, so an untapped resource. And from those 5,000 emails a year, that could be a new donor, a new staff person, a new board member, volunteers. So many different ways to use the ad grant to reach an audience. Otherwise, you're not engaging, and it's completely free of charge from that 10K budget. So those are the 3 case studies to show you that there is tangible impact to be found with the ad grant and how it works as an overview. And so just to wrap up as a framework for understanding how to use it before we discuss the tangible next steps for the application process, you could think of it like this. So number 1, plan ahead, determine the challenges your nonprofit has, or look at the goals that you're looking to achieve, right? So that's step number 1. Working backwards from there, pick or build a landing page that solves that specific action, right? So you might have various priorities and campaigns. And I just wanted to mention, as we talked about the problems that it could solve for you in the poll, there's no limit to how many campaigns you can run at once. So you don't have to choose one and then, wait another month to choose another one. No, you can run them simultaneously. And so here in step 2, you want to have a landing page that solves the specific action that you're looking people to take. So you would have a different landing page for email subscription and a different landing page for volunteers, for example. Step number 3 is going to be then using that keyword planner to find those relevant keywords to direct people to that page with that high volume of searches, and then using that ad grant budget to then cover those clicks, to bring those searches to your website, to turn those clicks into conversions. And so the way I like to think of it is using these free credits to create ads to drive call to actions on specific landing pages to your website. So you have multiple call to actions, multiple landing page, resulting in dynamic growth and engagement, regardless of what you're looking to achieve and where you're located as an organization. So I hope that makes sense in terms of the actual, applying the ad grant in action. And speaking of applying, Simon is going to talk about where you go from here, how to get the Google ad grant, and how much time it might take based on where you're at in the process.
Sounds good. So hopefully all of you are really excited about the grant now and want to learn about how to actually apply for the grant. So I'm going to talk you through the process. It actually got more complicated this year. So we're going to explain to you step by step what you would have to do at a high level. Okay, so first thing you need to do is to get your TechSoup token. David mentioned earlier in the webinar in terms of the criteria, how you have to be registered with TechSoup. If you're not registered yet, no problem. You just go to TechSoup in the country that you're in. So for us in Canada, it's TechSoup Canada. In the US, it's TechSoup, just TechSoup.org. So once you are registered with TechSoup, you need to grab what's called your TechSoup token. It's a validation token. Essentially, you're going to use this token to apply for the next stage in the process. But before we get there, I just want to explain the general timelines of how long it would take. If you are already registered with TechSoup, it's instant. You get your token right away in just a couple clicks. If you're not registered yet, I think it takes up to 10 business days for you to be registered. And then once you're there, then you can grab your token. So again, what is this for? Use this token to validate for the next stage, which is applying for Google for Nonprofits. So just give some context on what Google for Nonprofits is. It's an overarching program that Google is running that has all kinds of different beneficial initiatives for nonprofits. So they have G Suite for nonprofits. So if any of you have G Suite accounts and are paying, the $5 a month per email for that, you can actually get that free if you apply for Google for Nonprofits, and then you apply for G Suite for nonprofits. And then of course, another one of those programs there is the Google Ad Grant, which is what we're talking about. To actually complete the application, you're going to go to google.com/nonprofits. Now, in terms of the timeline, I put anywhere from between 0 to 14 days. Usually it's one or the other. Now, what I mean by that is if you've never applied for Google for Nonprofits before and you have your TechSoup token ready, you just submit it and it does it in the next, within the minute. You can get approved for Google for Nonprofits. The cases where it takes 14 days is where potentially someone in your organization in the past, someone who you might not even know or don't remember or don't have contact with anymore. So let's say they applied for it under maybe a personal email, and therefore you cannot access it anymore. It takes up to 14 days to basically regain access to your account. So that's why it's between 0 and 14 days. But once you are approved for Google for Nonprofits, you're going to create what's called a Google Ad account. Google Ads is just the platform that Google uses to run the ads. It's where you input your keywords. It's where you write your ad text. It's where you're going to see a report of the results and the metrics. So you need to create a Google Ad account. And to do that, you go to ads.google.com. You're going to set it up according to some specific instructions that Google has. And then you need to submit what is now called Part 1 pre-qualification. So Google is going to want to make sure that you set it up correctly. And there's a small little quiz, it's 3 or 4 questions that ask you some basic concepts about the Google ads. And so it's not hard at all, but you do need to get pre-qualified. This takes from between 1 to 5 days, and that really depends on how busy the team is. Sometimes they have an influx of people, or sometimes they're just swamped, so it can occasionally take longer. Once you are pre-qualified, you need to then set up your Google Ads account. So that's a little bit different from the other stage of creating the Google Ads account. When I say set up, I mean you're actually going to put some keywords in there. You're going to build a campaign. You're going to write some ad text and things like that. So you're actually going to do some work inside the account. And then you need to demonstrate to Google that you've done it correctly. And again, they also have some very strict instructions about this. So as long as you go through it carefully, it's usually not an issue. But pending that, once you're complete, you would then what's called enroll. That's part 2. So you're going to enroll in the Google Ads Ad Grants program. And so you're just submitting this account and say, please look at it, make sure it's correct. And this can also take between 1 to 5 days, again, depending on how busy the grants team is. I'm going to just give you a total high-level picture of how long that might take. So it could be anywhere from between 2 to 34 days. And I'm just generalizing here a little bit. We've had cases that have taken longer. It's just, sometimes, internally in an organization, just other things have happened, or maybe someone in the past has done it, but they've done something wrong, or sometimes you really just can't find something. So it can potentially take longer than that, but you know, if it's your first time doing it, you can get through it pretty quickly. So that's the grants process. Let's talk a bit about what happens after that. You know, how do you actually succeed with using the grant? So I'm going to take you through 7 tips in terms of how to do that. Oh, but let me actually first introduce a high-level concept in terms of what it also requires, like what kind of investment you need to put to make this work. So to be upfront, you need to put time into this. If you are thinking that you want to apply for the grant, but you don't really have time right now, you may not actually see a lot of results from it. You're going to be, excuse me, you're going to need a bit of know-how to do this, and that's what's going to get you results. And so what I'm going to do today is talk through in the next couple slides, talk to that expertise piece in terms of giving you some very concrete advice on building like the basic fundamentals of that. Okay, so just to illustrate that point, if you don't have time, you don't have expertise, it's going to be hard to actually get tangible results and to really move the needle very much. So, okay, so let's dive into the expertise piece. So first thing you want to do when you are approved for the grant is to strategize on how you're going to use it. You know, earlier on with the poll that David ran, you know, in terms of like what are the ways or what goals can it solve for you, you have to understand what that is off the bat. And that also may require you discussing with your team and just figuring out what those goals are. The reason you have to do this first is because the strategy informs everything else that you're going to do inside the account, especially step 2, which is to structure a campaign. So in Google Ads, a campaign is like a specific piece of jargon. It's kind of like a container for all the other work that you're going to do. And in general, you want to make a campaign specific to the goal that you're trying to achieve. For example, let's say you want to increase donations. So you're going to run a campaign, a separate solo campaign just to get donations. But let's say you also wanted to look for volunteers. And as David said, you can do as many campaigns as you want and run them all simultaneously, right? There's no limit. It's not like one can only run at a time. But so let's say you also want to do volunteers. Well, you would create a separate volunteer campaign, and that's where you'd put all the relevant work in there. And let's say you want to promote an event, that would be a third campaign just for the event, right? So you can only structure your campaigns properly if you have strategized in terms of how you're going to use it. Okay, step 3 is to research keywords. This is probably where you are going to want to spend the most of your time. Keywords is like the basis behind all the rest of the work that you're going to do as well, right? So what do I mean by researching keywords? Well, first, if you remember in the case studies, we showed you the keyword planner tool. That is a great place to do your research. There's a lot of tools out there in the marketplace. That's for most cases, that's the only one you're ever going to need. That's the only one that we use, and it's free to use. So what do you want to do when you research keywords? Well, as you go through the keyword planner tool, you're going to want to run a lot of searches on different ideas that you might have that are relevant to the campaign that you're trying to run. And the keywords that you want to select have to, well, I shouldn't say have to, but are more successful when they are A, highly relevant to what you're trying to promote, and B, also have high search traffic. You know, take for example, imagine you used a keyword that was like, had the perfect relevance to your campaign, but only 10 people are searching for it every month. Despite how perfect that keyword may be, no one is really going to see it, and therefore no one is going to click on it, and therefore no one is going to land on your website, and no one is actually going to take action after that. So you have to have a search volume behind that. The second piece of advice I'm going to give you is to optimize for something called quality score. I'll give you a kind of brief rundown in terms of what quality score is. This is a metric that is specific to the Google Ads platform. Quality score goes, it's ranked from 1 to 10. And in general, it's a measure of how relevant your keyword is to your ad text as well as your landing page. And what happens is the higher your quality score is, the more likely your ads will appear in the search results. And also the easier it is and the more likely it is that your ad will appear higher up on the page, right? It's always a competition. You're always in competition against other advertisers, whether that's for-profits or non-profits. And so having a better quality score means just better ranking overall, and therefore you're going to get a greater percentage of all the potential searches that are happening on that keyword. So quality score is incredibly, incredibly important. I added some notes here in terms of different ways that you can, or different methods that you can use to optimize for quality score. So the first one is called optimizing for long tail keywords. So just very quickly, long tail refers, or I should say the tail refers to how many words are in your keyword phrase. It's also contrasted by the concept of short tail keywords. So for example, a one-word keyword would be considered a short tail keyword because there's not very many words in that term. And actually, one-word keywords are not even allowed with the grants program. But in any case, a long tail keyword would be the opposite of that. So it would be a keyword phrase with, let's say, 5 different words in there. So for example, a short tail keyword would be donate. And a long tail keyword would be donate to my pet shelter or something like that, right? And so in general, long tail keywords will garner better quality scores because they are more specific. And when they're more specific, they tend to be more relevant, right? So you can try to optimize for some longer tail keywords. The second concept is called match type. I'm not really going to go into this too much because, well, it takes a little bit of time to actually fully explain. But there are different types of keywords that you can use. For instance, what's called broad match, phrase match, and exact match. Also one called modified broad, but there's just different forms of keywords, and some are more strict than others. And the stricter versions of them tend to have higher relevancy. So that's something that you can play around with as well. Number 3, there's another form of keywords called negative keywords. And in general, negative keywords means that you're going to remove certain interpretations of a keyword from causing your ads to appear. And that can be very useful because, you know, let's say your keyword has, could be potentially interpreted in many different ways. And let's say some of those ways are not actually relevant to you. If you negative out those other interpretations, you're left with a more relevant result. And so that can also help your quality score. The last advice is to remove duplicate keywords. So you really don't want to be using the same keyword twice in your account unless you're using them in mutually exclusive geographies. But if you are in the same geography and using the same keywords, what's going to happen is you're just going to compete with yourself, and you're just going to make it more difficult to rank well in Google search results. So you don't want to use duplicate keywords. Okay, so that's the keyword phase. And I'm advising this specific order of doing things. So once you do your keywords, you need to then organize them into ad groups. So just for context, ad groups is another term that's specific to the Google ad platform. An ad group generally is like a subcontainer. So you have campaigns as the highest level container, and within a campaign you have other containers, subcontainers, and these are called ad groups. And what an ad group really is it's a subcontainer that holds all the keywords, as well as it holds a corresponding set of ad text that will show to people when the keyword is activated in search results. I'll show you an example in just a moment that will help clarify this. So the best advice I can give you for ad groups is to not put all your keywords into one ad group. And in cases where I've taken over an account that a nonprofit they weren't able to get working, I see this problem happen a lot. It's like probably the number one problem that I see. Okay, so you want to try and group out your keywords into other ad groups. Now, let's take a look at what that means, because that can be confusing when I just say that by word. So let's look at an illustration. Okay, so remembering that an ad group is a subcontainer within a campaign. Let's take, for example, you have one ad group, we could just call it ad group 1. And because it's a subcontainer, it contains all kinds of keywords. And what also happens in an ad group is you have ad text, and that's what's shown to people if your keyword matches with their search. And it's important to know that all the keywords in your ad group will share the same ad text. So in this example, keywords of donation box, donate furniture, and what to do with used clothing, well, they're all going to show that same ad text if it shows up in Google search. Now, this can be pretty suboptimal. And the reason is, if you take a look at the ad text, it says find local donation boxes, use our free locator tool, etc., etc. So it's a really great ad for the first keyword on the list, donation box. But it's getting less relevant when we're talking about donate furniture. You know, for me, as a potential donor, I might be thinking like, can my furniture even fit in this donation box? Like, maybe I'm not so sure about those things. So it's just not as relevant as what it could be. And so that's why I'm going to give you a better example here. You're going to want to split up different keywords into their own ad groups. So let's say we take the same example, but we've moved each of those keywords into their own ad groups. And so now what we can do with this is we can write ad text for each of those keyword ideas. And so I have a lot more freedom to say some more specific things to that keyword. So again, donation box, that ad text was fine. But now for donate furniture, instead of talking about donation boxes, I can say donate your used furniture, schedule a free pickup, don't send your furniture to landfill, etc., right? So highly relevant to what that keyword idea is about. And also for used clothing, you know, I can maybe take some more creative liberties here. You know, are you running out of closet space, right? Not something I could say for donating furniture. But now because I have grouped out clothing, I can say something that's highly relevant to that. So that's what I mean by grouping on your ad groups. Okay, step 5 is to write effective ad text. You saw in the example just a moment ago what that looks like, right? Every ad group requires a set of ad text, and you do want to make it relevant to your keywords. And so the best advice I can give you here is to have minimum 2 variations of your ad text. That's something mandated by the program standards for Google Grants. But really, best practice is to have 3 variations of your ad text. It's just there were some studies shown, and they got like double-digit percentage more traffic than ones that had less than that, right? So it helps a lot to have 3 variations. Okay, step 6 is to build a landing page. I mean, if you have a good one that you can use already, that's fine too. But just have a solid landing page that you can send people to when they click on your ad. Just loosely, because landing pages is actually like a whole other area of digital marketing that we could spend another webinar talking about. I'm just going to define it very simply today as a page that's designed to engage and convert your traffic to a specific call to action. So all I mean here is, you know, if you're running ads that are talking about like a fun event coming up, it's imperative that you send them to a page that talks about the event, you know, when it is, how do you register for it, things like that, as opposed to just driving it to your homepage. You don't want to make people work for it. You're going to send them right to the most relevant information. Step 7, the last step, and probably, you know, the most underrated, is that you need to monitor your results and optimize. You know, if you remember at the beginning with that small formula, I said, you know, you have to spend time on this, and this is also where you're going to spend time, right? You have to, you can't just set it and leave it. You need to look at what's working and what's not working, and it's very hard to get it perfect right off the bat, right? So there's some trial and error, there's some reactions you need to make. So a couple things on top of that. You know, number 1, not only is it just good for you, there are also some program standards that you need to maintain, and so that's where you have to monitor your results and just make some corrections if certain keywords become non-compliant with their standards. Google sends out a monthly report that tells you if there's anything that's out of compliance. So maybe they said, okay, this keyword is just not relevant enough. So they'll send that to you and you should take action on that. There's another stipulation, for example, where you have to maintain a minimum of 5% CTR. That stands for click-through rate. So there's just some standards that they enforce. Lastly, you need something called Google Analytics on your website. This is virtually mandatory now as part of the grants program, but as a byproduct, any website that has Google Analytics, it's just really great to have. If you're not familiar, Analytics is a free platform, and it tells you some data about like what people do when they get your site and how many people are going there, right? So it's just fantastic to have as an organization. And so to really succeed with that as well, you're going to want to have something called conversion tracking. All that means is you want to make sure that you know exactly when someone performs an action that is valuable to you, like donating or registering for an event. So those are the tips, and that actually concludes the body of what we wanted to talk about today. And we have some time left for some Q&A, so I'll just turn it over to Marina, and happy to receive any questions that you have.
That's great. Thank you, Simon, and David as well. It's been a great presentation, and we have lots of questions coming in. So first of all, I'd like to address, is there a limited number of these grants given by Google or a cap on the number of organizations that can apply?
That's a great question, and there is not. At least not one that Google has actually expressed to us. But since 2003, they've just been giving out grants to organizations that are eligible, and they're always they're accepting people on a rolling basis. So as soon as you apply, then you can get the grant. It's not like there's different time periods where they're going to accept applications.
Excellent. And can the ads be targeted for geographic regions?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the strengths of the program, of Google, the platform. You have a lot of control over that. You can do it by postal code, zip code. You can do it by cities. You can do it by country. You can even pick a point on a map and do a radius around that. So there's just actually a lot of control over that.
And with the grants, do you get the full ad spectrum that's available from Google? So we had some questions particularly about display ads or video ads.
Oh, I mean, I wish that all of it was you were able to do with the grant. So that's a great question. As of right now, you are only allowed to use the grant on the search network. And all that means is that it's keyword-based advertisement that is text when it's shown and will only appear in Google search results. I mean, I say only, but like that's a huge thing already. Like it's just so massive. And then so the question was referring to display targeting, which is just different options of targeting people, as well as different forms of what that looks like. For example, like banners or videos and stuff like that. So right now it's not included, but maybe in the future, I have my fingers crossed.
Awesome. And we have quite a few questions coming in about the application process. So first of all, if an organization has applied in the past and wasn't successful, can they reapply?
Absolutely. You can always try again. I mean, especially if the reason for being rejected was like maybe you didn't set something up correctly. The only cases where you're going to be rejected, like it won't work, is that, you know, if you're just inherently not matching with the main criteria, like maybe you're not registered. If you're not registered as a nonprofit or charity, like you will never get it until you do that. If you're in one of those cause areas that they don't accept, if you're a hospital, if you're a school, something like that, that's also not going to change. But everything else, you can always reapply again.
Great. And for an organization that might have had multiple accounts set up over the years, can they be merged, or can you apply those to kind of just like one account?
Sure. So, okay. So that question, if you have multiple accounts, it may be like multiple Google ad accounts, right? Just normal Google ad accounts. So in that case, if that's a situation, what you would do is you create another one, like a brand new one, and because that's stipulated by the program, and you use that to apply for the grant. So that's the way you have to do it. There's not really a way to have multiple Google grant accounts though, if that was the question, because it shouldn't be possible. every charity ID can only be registered with one Google Ad account. So in that case, it's not possible and you can't really merge it. I'm sorry, but let me just return. Let's say you have paid, like your own accounts. The grant must always be separate from those ones.
That's excellent, because I was going to move on to that question next. If you're already using a paid AdWords account, can you still access the grants?
Yep, 100%. And there's a lot of value in doing that. You know, maybe you can move some of the keywords that you're paying for and move them to the grant account where you're not paying for it. But there are certain advantages to actually having a paid account. In general, paid accounts are going to pick up more traffic than a grant account. It's just kind of how the program works and how some of the different nuances work. As well as maybe you want to use the paid account for some display ads, some banner ads, and perhaps just use the grant for keywords and stuff. So there's many different ways that you can play around with that.
Excellent. And when setting up the ads, is it possible to do non-English ads, for instance, maybe in French, or if you're targeting people who don't have English as a first language?
Yeah, absolutely. There's language targeting. You can run ads in many, many different languages. So, yep, that's all doable.
Excellent. And can you link different landing pages depending on the keyword or change them monthly?
I like that. I like that. Someone's thinking. That's a smart thing to do, in fact. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I should be more, generally you're going to set the targeting at the ad text level. But yeah, you can, well, especially from campaign to campaign, you're going to want it to direct it to different pages. And you can change it as often as you want. There's some, I mean, within reason, right? Like you could change it every minute, but who would do that, right? So have a reasonable cadence for that and you're all good. Yeah.
Excellent. The TechSoup token, does it expire? And if it does, how do you maintain that to provide like a seamless experience?
When you generate it, it's good for, I think it's 60 days at a time. If that is expired, then you need to just generate another token. It's pretty simple to do, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah.
Awesome. And the last thing I want to touch on today is researching keywords. So maybe you could just touch again on where you go to find that. And the other question that I had was, is the keyword tool more robust than what's available in the free version?
Okay, sure. So, okay, to get the one that we were talking about, the Keyword Planner tool, you would have to access it from within a Google Ad account, which is free to create, by the way. Anyone can create a Google Ad account. It's free to do. And that's from there, you go to tools when you log in, and you can access that tool. That tool in of itself it's free. There is no like premium version of it. That's just the tool. And it's really good. Like it's 99% of the people here that's what they'll only ever need. And again, that's the only one that we use, right? I was just alluding to like there's other tools from other companies, like other for-profit companies. So they have their own, take on how you want to research keywords. And so those ones are paid. Probably you won't need it though.
Excellent. Well, thank you both. I know we had some questions as well about what the investment would be if a nonprofit wanted to talk with you about taking over their accounts. For that question and for any other questions that weren't answered today, I think reaching out to David directly is probably your best bet. I know that David and Simon have both very generously offered to take questions by email if you have further questions for them or your question didn't get answered today. David, Simon, any last words before we sign off?
Yeah, just yeah, absolutely. If you have any questions, even if it's about just more of an assessment about your nonprofit and maybe what you're looking to use the ad grant for, where you're at in the process, obviously any questions that are more general, I wouldn't have access to your account. But anything more about, hey, can we kind of talk this over and see what we might be able to use it for? I have dozens of those conversations every week. So yeah, feel free to email me. And if you have questions about specific services, please email me, and if necessary, I can talk about that. But the last thing I would say is really just, like Simon, had explained, there's no deadline to apply, and there's no, you're not competing against other organizations, as it's not a grant awarded based on merit. So I'd say really take your time and research, if you're going to do it in-house, if you're going to look externally, and make the most out of it. There's no reason to rush. That's where we find sometimes the nonprofits get into trouble, is when they rush because they think there's a deadline. There isn't at this point. So really just, calculate the time needed, the energy needed, and then, that's how you'll get the most out of it. That's what we find, and we want to make sure you have a positive experience, whether you work with us or not.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Simon and David, to you both. It's been a wonderful presentation, so much information. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I do want to remind everyone that we are going to follow up with you by email this afternoon or by tomorrow morning with the webinar recording and the full slide deck as well. There will be a short survey that will take less than 5 minutes to fill out, so we do hope you'll complete that for us if you can, and you will have an opportunity there to let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered in a future session. We'll be sure to share the feedback with both Simon and David as well. Our next free webinar is coming up in a couple of weeks. It's going to be on Tuesday, November 26th. For those of you that are familiar with our Thursday time slot, you'll want to note the change there, that it will be on a Tuesday. We're going to be discussing nonprofit budgeting for beginners. There will be a link to register in the email you receive later today or tomorrow. With that, I want to thank you all again for joining us today, and I hope to see you at a future webinar soon. Bye-bye.